Welcome back to the channel. This game is the second round of the British Championship, which Nigel was playing in 1984. He was playing David Strauss, and I am originally from England, but emigrated to the United States. Position started as a Retty, but turned into an English. And the symmetrical Agincourt defence. All standard stuff. A very quiet opening. White challenges the centre. And castles here. If black takes the pawn on c4, then rook to c1 is extremely strong, and the black queen will start to run out of squares after queen to b4, and it gets chased around the board. So it's not a very good line for black. This move shows some ambition of a kingside attack and a potential push of e5. I think f5 would have been a better move here. Forcing bishop to f8, potentially to defend the e-pawn. And white has a nice space advantage. Black looks a bit cramped. This is another move which is slightly weakening, but it has to hold up the f5 advance. But e5 comes anyway, busting open the centre. And already you would say white's doing very well. Knight's got no sensible square to go to apart from h5, and it looks a bit silly out there. It's obviously going to come back to g7 at some point. And this is a nice idea. It's offering the sacrifice of the knight that gets serious space advantage in the centre and potentially kicks the bishop away, etc. And here Nigel decides to play bishop to c5, which is not terribly bad, but I thought there was better options. If he tries queen to b8, then knight to c6 is very strong. And after something like this, and c7, and black has to give up a rook, and the knight will fall. And in this position, white's still only a pawn up according to the engine, but is in a very nice position, and it will be very uncomfortable for black. That's if he played queen to b8. If he played queen to d8, which I think is the best move in this position, then potentially after e6, again you wouldn't want to take it. There's a lot of pressure everywhere, and bishop on b7 will be on 3, and b4. But after bishop takes d5, I think black's doing okay. I mean, he's going obviously the knight's going to go back again, get lost, but this position is fairly equal, I would say, and certainly a lot more playable than the bishop c5 move that Nigel did play, which does definitely give white an advantage. So hits the pinned bishop, black counterattacks in the centre. So white's recovered the sacrifice piece, and this recapture by the pawn splits the pawns on the queen side. Potentially knight to c5 would have been a better option. Knight takes c5 would have been a better option. But he's hitting the knight, which duly jumps into c6, which is a nice outpost for it. A trade of rooks. And white is clearly in front now. The knight's misplaced on h5, and it's going to take a while to get back into the game. The D pawn's an absolute monster for white, and the knight on c6 is always going to be a thorn. And I don't think black ever wants to really take it because the pawn will go to c6, and the pawn on c5 is going to become a weakness for him as well. So he plays queen to d6, getting out of the line of the rook, and also to overprotect the c pawn. And in that position, previous position, Nigel actually offered a draw, which understandably white rejected because he's clearly in a better position, and there's only one side really that's going to be pushing for the win. So it hits the bishop, which has to go to c8. I mean, if he takes the knight, then b takes c6, and the pawn, as we said before, is huge. And queen to e3, centralising the queen, also hitting the c pawn. Nigel tries to reroute the knight, and white shuts that down by just stopping the squares, the f5 square, essentially, but also clearing the way for the bishop on e1. So Nigel's reduced to shuffling his pieces around, waiting for something to happen. So the bishop comes out and hits the queen, which has to go to a passive square because he's got to keep an eye on the c pawn still as well. So white hits the bishop again, which goes back to c1 again, c8 again. Centralises the rook, and now eyeing the e7 square for his rook, and also the check on e7 with the knight, followed by d6. So Nigel sidesteps that, but now the knight on g7 gets pinned by the queen, and it's a very, very uncomfortable position for black. He's really got no play at all, and his reduce is just trying to shuffle his pieces around. And here the queen hits the bishop again, but maintains the pin on the g7 knight, so he has to go back again. And he just defends the g pawn. There was a better move in this position, which would have been quite nice, which was bishop d6. And obviously, if you can't take the bishop because rook to e8 checks nice because the knight's on g7's pinned. So the queen has to go back, and it's just losing. And so, although I mean, you could try. Knight to f8 in this position, but I think that's even worse because black can just apply the pressure. White can just apply the pressure with something like queen to e5, and obviously the queen's now overloaded and can't take the queen because of rook takes knight mate, and yeah, there's no real playable moves for black in this position. So yeah, so bishop d6 would have been nice, and obviously Nigel just shifts the queen about, queen to g8, then g5, and again, black is really struggling for any sensible moves. Knight to e7 might be coming, and it's all good. But he didn't play. He played h3, which is just is a good move. It's just reinforces the g pawn. Probably one of the only moves Nigel could play at this point. And now the rook's coming to e7, and this is a horror show really. Rook to a6. I think with the idea he's going to eventually have to give up the rook for the knight because the knight is just too powerful. So the bishop defends the rook, and to stop the rook takes knight. The queen has to move to get out of the discovered attack. Bishop c7 puts pressure on the a pawn. Queen comes back. There really is nothing else to do really. And d6 just reinforces the rook again, whilst maintaining the attack on the a pawn. Bit of a desperation move, but there is not much else you can do really. It just, and queen to e2 puts more pressure on the e file. Here, black decides to give up rook for the bishop, rook for the knight, sorry, and try and get his pieces into some sort of position where he can at least gain a bit of space, but you can't really do much. And here, white simplifies by literally giving back the exchange for an extra pawn. The c pawn's going to drop. The knight on g7's pinned, and he's running out of moves. So queen f7, the a pawn drops. Bit of a desperation move, takes the a pawn. Why not? But then after the next move, bishop to c3, threatening queen takes g7 mate. Nigel resigned. You can't really do much after queen f7, d7 picks up the bishop, and mate will follow eventually. Disappointing game from Nigel, but I think Strauss played very well throughout the game. He didn't give black any chances and always had the advantage and maintained it. So, indifferent start from Nigel, winning his first game and losing his second game against a lower rated opponent. So let's see how he bounces back in the next rounds. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and until next time, cheers for now.